So my name is Preston Jenkins. I was born and raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and went through all those typical church experiences as a youth. Knew about my sexuality, but only had to confront it after coming home early from a mission, and saw many miracles and had a lot of help in coming back to activity and ultimately getting to finish my mission. And I guess like the one big thing, like theme of what I've learned from all of my experiences is that life happens whether you're good or not. Like people go through hard things, but I've learned, at least for myself, that Christ thoroughly heals us from anything that goes wrong in our lives. I truly believe that through the atonement of Jesus Christ, everything that's unfair can be made right. And I'm grateful for the many experiences that I've had that have demonstrated that healing power. For me, it began when I was young. Boys started talking about girls, and that's not what I noticed. I was noticing boys. And I just kind of shoved it aside, just figured I'll go along with status quo and just go along with what everybody else is doing, and never really had words to describe my experience until high school. I was born and raised in a very faithful home, and so for years I just kind of saw it as just a piece of the puzzle that included me, and just kind of shoved it aside. It was hard, but I never felt the need to tell anybody. I guess out of fear, but also I just didn't see the point in bringing it up. You just go through those gospel motions and never felt relevant to tell it to anybody. So when it came time to serve a mission, I was eager to serve and ready to go. I was called to serve in Tokyo, Japan, and was excited. I loved Japanese culture. I loved the language. I had studied it in high school, and it was kind of a cool, tender mercy that I got to serve there as well. Typical MTC experience, typical first transfer, I'm sure, even out in the field. Struggling with the language, struggling to figure out what the heck a missionary is supposed to do. Unfortunately, though, it was the second transfer where things started to take a turn for the worse. I had a native companion my second transfer, and it was his last transfer. He was emotionally abusive and was even sexually abusive for about 5 weeks of that transfer. And abuse is an interesting thing. It certainly warps reality for the victim, and I very quickly shut myself off to all feeling. Just turned off my emotions, turned off even spirituality. I determined to just pretend like it didn't happen. Just figured I could move on in spite of it. But with the pressures of the mission field, it just became too hard to cope with that. And I ultimately made the decision that I wanted to go home and did not want to be out there anymore. I determined that if I was going to get sent home, I would need to tell my mission president that I was gay. And that was going to be my ticket home, because I just couldn't bring myself to tell him about the abuse. And so I wrote it in a letter, and we had mission president interviews, and I remember handing him the letter, and he read it, and he just looked up and said, "So? Like, you can stay a missionary, like that doesn't have to be a reason to go home." But with all of those experiences with the abuse, I did not feel myself and was just very broken and was determined to go home. And so I just kind of pushed the issue. And after talking with my parents over the phone, after talking with my bishop over the phone, it was just determined that I should go home. I had this ignorant hope at the time that like things would get better if I got home. Not realizing that if I kept things to myself, nothing was ever going to be done to help or to fix things. So after about a month of being home, my mom very graciously and very gently just continued to ask and prompt me to share what had actually happened. I mean, it was no mystery that something had gone on. And it took about a month of being home before I finally felt comfortable telling somebody what had happened. And so I wrote it all out, like in kind of like a manic episode. I stayed up all night and wrote out just chronologically everything that had happened on my mission. And the next morning I just gave my mom the laptop and said, "Look, you asked what happened, here's what happened. And I don't want to talk about it." My bishop at the time was David Holland. He's Elder Holland's son. And so when David Holland figured out what had happened, he contacted his father, and Elder Holland got involved at that point. He invited me to come see him at his office in Salt Lake. But I'll never forget, he greeted me. I sat down in his office, and the first thing that he told me was, if you'd like to leave the church, I will help you through the process of leaving the church. And then he quickly said, that's not my suggestion. He's like, obviously I'm not encouraging that idea, but I just want you to know right now that it's an option. I got mad, and I vocalized for the first time that I wasn't leaving and that I was going to stay. I was in Provo for the next 2 years, pretending to go to school, but was actually very unhealthy and mentally not very stable and very well. And so I struggled with PTSD because of that experience on my mission, and began to slowly distance myself from God. Then I started to have to confront a lot of the questions that I had shoved aside. And my mom was the biggest support through all of that. For 2 years, I was on the phone with my mom every day, crying and just expressing all of those frustrations. There were several key conversations that we had that began to shift my perspective back towards God and faith. So I started to pay more attention when my family or my parents, or especially my mom, bore her testimony to me. I started to pay attention to any mention of Jesus Christ or the atonement, because I really wanted to understand how something like that could really heal me, or more specifically, how can Jesus Christ heal me? And so in time, I just began to shift my attention more towards church things. I started to attend church again. I started to stay the full 3 hours, and little things like that to kind of slowly ease my way back into activity. I moved home. I went back to Las Vegas. My dad was in the stake presidency at the time, and sometime after moving home, he pulled me aside. He's like, we would like to extend the call to you to be a seminary teacher. And I was like, are you joking? I was like, Dad, I'm a basket case. You don't want me in front of kids, and especially not teaching them about the gospel. And he just chuckled and he said, Preston, the stake president knows everything about your situation, and we strongly feel that this is from God. And I don't want you to answer me right now. I want you to pray and ask God if this is right for you. That day was the first time I knelt down and prayed in years. It's like, can we just wipe the board clean and just start over? That year in seminary, we were studying the Book of Mormon, and I had been a missionary. I knew that missionaries teach people to start with the Book of Mormon if you want a testimony of Jesus Christ. And so I said, Heavenly Father, we're starting over. I'm going to read the Book of Mormon this year. I'm going to teach these kids correct doctrine. And I want to know how this stuff applies to me and what it means to me. I mean, there wasn't one massive moment while teaching seminary that changed my perspective. It was just, I was in the Word again. I was reading the Book of Mormon. I was teaching doctrine. I was praying again daily. And it was just the culmination of that over that school year, that by the end of the school year, I felt healthy again. I felt emotionally stable again. I felt actually like myself again. At the end of that summer, I just felt like I needed to go back up to school at BYU, Idaho. I was looking into housing, was trying to figure out contract, figure out my schedule, when out of the blue, I had the impression that I should finish my mission. I was not expecting that. My mission was not even on my mind. I used to say you couldn't pay me to finish my mission, and yet I felt like I needed to. It all happened so fast that I found myself back in the mission field, and Atlanta was wonderful. I met all the people that I was meant to meet. I felt very strongly in the first transfer of my mission that I should start expressing my story to at least priesthood leaders so that they could use me as a resource. but I never knew how to breach that topic. Like, I never knew how to tell them about what had happened until General Conference, October 2015. Elder Holland spoke about my mom and I in his talk, Behold Thy Mother. So then I finally had a way of telling people what had happened. And it was wonderful because these priesthood leaders took the opportunity to put me in contact with people that were struggling in their jurisdiction or their stewardship. And I met with many families. I met with many individuals. I spoke to high council groups and things like that, just to let people know that you can be faithful and experience same-sex attraction. You can heal when you've been wounded. You can come home from a mission and find purpose in your life. Mental illness doesn't have to be constantly a drag in your life. It can be present, obviously, in your life, but it doesn't have to run your life. I came home, transferred back to BYU Provo, went to the MTC and applied to be a teacher there and was admitted as a teacher there. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, is going to school at BYU Provo again, teaching at the Missionary Training Center. I'm excited for what's next. Like, I have every intention of getting married and sealed in the temple. I have every intention of raising a family in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I have every intention of being active and faithful. I got to know Jesus Christ. I got to understand more why he did what he did, why it was essential. But not just the on-paper intellectual side to the atonement of Jesus Christ. I got to experience it. Like, I knew what it meant to have wounds heal. I knew what it meant to have my heart break, and I knew what it meant for Jesus Christ to piece by piece put it back together. And I have scars, but so does he. And he taught me that it's okay to be scarred, that we can still move on, that we can remember, but we don't always have to carry the weight. That we'll know that we used to feel hurt, but we don't need to feel it now. I've received many personal revelations that have taught me a bit about who I was before, and again, why I'm here experiencing what I'm experiencing. And it's just to help Jesus Christ in his work.